It's fair to say that WWE have made what we would lovingly call in some parts of England a pig's ear of their tag team lineage. Now, this has nothing to do with the random dual promotion controlled twofold gold like the New Japan affiliated international tag team titles, the UWF adjacent intercontinental tag titles, or the NWA co-proed WWWF tag titles of the 60s, nor does it have anything to do with the WWE women's tag team titles that seem to have some kind of witch's curse quite literally put upon them for some time. That's a whole other thing. Now, we're talking about the main tag team titles of the WWE and how its 50 plus years in action have left us with a series of timeline breaks and branches that would make the guys at the TVA want to pull out their pruners. Strap in, because we're going behind the scenes on the WWE's dubious doubles dichotomy to decipher what metaphorical cable plugs in where as we unravel the messy legacy of the WWE Tag Team Titles. There is conflict and confusion from the off, with varying reports as to when the then WWWF Tag Team Championship lineage begins. The history books list the first ever tag champs of the Triple W's as Crazy Luke Graham and Tarzan Tyler, winning the titles by beating Dick the Bruiser and the Sheik in a tournament on June the 3rd, 1971. This is cited from WWE.com, who record Luke and Tarzan being the first champs holding the gold for 185 days. However, according to the great wrestling record keepers at Cage Match and the Internet Wrestling Database, no such match took place on June the 3rd of 1971. The book Wrestling Title Histories by Royal Duncan and Gary Will lists Graham and Tyler as allegedly winning a tournament for the belts. That word there, allegedly, is doing a lot of heavy lifting. The night in question, the WWWF had a show in Washington's National Arena, and both Luke Graham and Tarzan Tyler were in singles action. When it comes to their opponents, Dick the Bruiser and the Sheik, well, they never wrestled Luke Graham and Tarzan Tyler at any point, never mind in the final of a tournament. We would see another twin title tourney tall tale in WWF's Double Div a few years later. The record books would state that when Billy White Wolf got injured, he and Chief Jay Strongbow forfeited the titles, with Mr. Fuji and Professor Tanaka coming out on top of a tournament to become undisputed champs. However, the record books give no indication of any such golden gauntlet actually taking place. Now, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary for the WWF or the WWWF to fake a tournament, as Pat Patterson, of course, the first ever Intercontinental Champion, allegedly earned that accolade by being the last man standing on a hot night in Rio de Janeiro. We would go on to learn that the entire inaugural IC title tournament was phony baloney, and the company just strapped Pat. So the idea of them simply naming Luke and Tarzan as their champions with a fantasy backstory of a multi-team battle for the belts seems what is most likely to have happened here. In a time where kayfabe is alive and well, it's certainly far more compelling and a lot cheaper to say that your champs battled the best on the planet to claim the prize on a show that you just happened to miss. Following this, one of the most popular pieces of tag team title murkiness comes to pass. We'll go to October of 1990 now, where the Rockers, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, were riding a wave of popularity that would ultimately lead to glory in a title match against the Hart Foundation, taped for Saturday night's main event. It was during this title-winning milestone that the top rope snapped and left all four competitors flailing, since so much of their match they'd planned for this wrestling title relied heavily on, a working wrestling ring. That night, top rope be damned, the Rockers became World Wrestling Federation Tag Team Champions, except they didn't. Vince hated the match so much that it was pulled from the broadcast. Despite the Rockers spending several days on the road as Tag Team Champions, their gold-winning moment was scrubbed from history, and the belts were returned to Bret Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. The match is available to watch on the 2007 Shawn Michaels DVD, Heartbreak and Triumph. but the Rockers' one and only title win earned 0 stars and precisely 1 asterisk in the record books. We saw the Menage a Dirt medals flip and flop away from TV cameras in 1993. Money Inc. and the Steiner brothers swapped the straps throughout a house show loop in June. It was acknowledged on TV, the idea being to get people to come along to the house shows because anything can happen in the World Wrestling Federation. I address this because there is another piece of tag title lore that should probably be discussed here. One title change that allegedly wasn't expected by the fans at a live event or by the creative team took place in March of '94 when Men on a Mission faced the Quebecers at the Royal Albert Hall in London. It's been reported that Mabel legitimately knocked out Pierre Ouellette and consequently didn't kick out of the expected 3 count, leading to Men on a Mission becoming tag team champions. This has since been rebuked by all parties involved that this was a botch. Matthew Gregg did a lovely video all about it on his channel. But it was worth mentioning at this point since it's one that often comes up when people talk about title belt silly buggery. I think of all the titles in WWE, I think the tag belts take the award for the best variety of reasons behind vacancies. Obviously, the belts are prone to being stripped when 1 or 2 of the champs involved go down with an injury. But away from that, we saw the example like Bob Backlund and Pedro Morales, their first and only tag title reign, end within 24 hours because Bob, as then WWF heavyweight champion, wasn't allowed to hold 2 titles in 2 divisions. No wonder he hated the new generation so much, watching Shawn Michaels and Diesel run around with all the gold that time. Actually, speaking of Shawn Michaels and his general title lineage, he has more vacancies to his name than a Swindon Travelodge on Christmas Day. He's had a couple in his doubles runs as well. There was the storyline argument with Kevin Nash that saw he and Diesel vacate the titles in '94. What a pittance! A second reign that was reversed when shenanigans saw then champion Owen Hart and British Bulldog draft Yokozuna in to replace an unavailable Owen, only for Owen to run in and take the pinfall in that match. Then, a real-life argument with Bret Hart saw Shawn's sunny days as tag champion with Stone Cold Steve Austin come to an unexpected halt, with Dude Love eventually replacing Shawn, only for Austin to be benched with an injury, causing the titles to be forfeited completely. A lot of vacancies, quite messy. Now, the WWF Tag Team Championships merged with their WCW counterparts in November of 2001 in the dying embers of the Invasion storyline, with the Dudley Boys unifying both sets of belts in a steel cage match against the Hardys. What we didn't know at this time is the ending of one iconic set of belts will set off a chain of events that will lead to the very end of this one true tag team timeline. Because with the end of the Invasion storyline and the end of the Monday Night Wars comes WWE building its own wars internally with the brand split, Raw and SmackDown getting bespoke rosters and the tag team titles becoming exclusive property of SmackDown for the first few months until those evil Canadians and that one Englishman, the Un-Americans, took the belts from Edge and Hollywood Hulk Hogan and signed exclusive contracts to join Raw on Mondays. So the great and powerful SmackDown general manager Stephanie McMahon comes up with a solution. New WWE Tag Team Titles with a little tint of blue on them. They are won by the odd couple of Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit in a tournament that was far more legit than the one Luke Graham and Tarzan Tyler won, and it begins a new tag title lineage from here. 02 SmackDown was very much the work rate show, and these twin pieces of gold became the center of the universe for the famous SmackDown 6, Benoit and Angle, Edge and Rey Mysterio, and Los Guerreros. Meanwhile, the OG belts would be quietly rebranded as the World Tag Team Titles, falling in line with Raw's World Heavyweight title and differentiating themselves from the new kids on the SmackDown block. WWE added more belts for the same reason they added the aforementioned World title to the mix, so they could present championship matches on solo branded house shows to up the numbers and, as it would come to pass, present title matches on solo branded pay-per-views. The World Tag Team Titles had a very different few years to their Blue Brothers. On no less than 3 occasions, the holders of the gold were decided by the fans spontaneously on Taboo Tuesday and Cyber Sunday events, 2 of which were world title contenders who weren't selected to fight for the top belt, and the other time was when the online audience chose Roddy Piper to team with Ric Flair to bury the Spirit Squad and hold the gold for a bit. It would also be this iteration of the titles that would be lost and won by the same person in the same match, with Hardcore Holly and Cody Rhodes losing the belts to Ted DiBiase Jr. and Cody Rhodes. Sadly, Cody didn't pin himself to win/lose that title. It would have been very Colin Bomber Harris of him to do so. On SmackDown, meanwhile, the new WWE Tag Team Titles were still considered the work rate belts. That is, if you casually forget the Legion of Doom reboot with Heidenreich, the Greaser's team of Deuce and Domino, and the S&M silliness of the Bashams. Paul London and Brian Kendrick, by the way, added some stability with that division, with 300+ days as consistent champs, making them the longest reigning champions of the tag team divisions across the Ruthless Aggression era. It would also become a co-promoted belt in 2007, WWE having recently reincarnated ECW with the same evil energy that Grindelwald reincarnated that dead Chillin in Fantastic Beasts' Secret of Dumbledore. The SmackDown Tag Team titles were announced as being shared with ECW, saves making new belts for them, I guess. They will be challenged for by some of the biggest ECW tag teams in history, such as Tommy Dreamer and Colin Delaney, CM Punk and Kane, and Shannon Moore and Jimmy Wang Yang. I'm sorry, were you expecting other teams? They would quietly be withdrawn from ECW competition by 2008. Soz lads. As the brand split became somewhat lax due to what I believe to be a leak via ECW, the Raw and SmackDown Tag Team Champions, the Colognes and Miz and John Morrison respectively, became intertwined in a feud that led to WrestleMania 25 in April of 2009. On that evening, Carlito and Primo Colón defeated Miz and Morrison in a lumberjack match to win both sets of belts, becoming known as the Unified WWE Tag Team Champions. Whilst carried together, both belts still maintained their own legacy for the next year and a half, with a decision made on August 16th, 2010 to do something slightly different. That was the night, as the Spice Girls foretold, that 2 became 1, and the anonymous general manager declared that the belts would now just be called the WWE Tag Team Championships, and Bret Hitman Hart, of all people, bestowed then champions, the Hart Dynasty, with all new titles representing the change. Whilst it was a lovely moment, it's a shame that the belts in question were those horrible dirty penny titles that we all agree look rubbish. The decision to merge the belts was one made by Vince McMahon, of course, who said it would be easier to market 1 set of tag team titles. It was also less hassle to get 1 set of belts through an airport than 2. At this point, we say goodbye to the deepest derivation of twin titles, as from here, WWE recognizes the OG titles, the ones won in a faux tournament by Lou Graham and Tarzan Tyler, as deactivated. A decision was made to embrace the shorter lineage of the SmackDown-born WWE Tag Team titles that began with Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle in 2002. We're not entirely sure why WWE higher-ups chose one over t'other. Maybe to make the company feel fresh and trendy by having younger belts. It would certainly be in keeping with WWE around this period, which was the PG era where they were constantly trying to attract new people to a hip, cool wrestling product. Either way, we have our first split in the tag team timeline here, but it's not our last. In 2016, WWE started taking the brand split seriously again and landlocked the tag titles to Raw. This means that the Monday night exclusive tag team gold is actually the original SmackDown exclusive tag team gold. Raw just pilfered the prolificness of their end of the week counterpart. They even had the audacity to name them the Raw Tag Team Championships, the equivalent of sticking a label over the top of somebody else's Tupperware full of spaghetti in the office kitchen. So what did SmackDown do with this? Well, the same thing they did in 2002. They sent out a McMahon offspring to introduce new SmackDown Tag Team titles. This time, it was Shane McMahon alongside SmackDown Live GM Daniel Bryan doing the unveiling, and it was a blue-strapped, slightly less dirty version of the dirty penny belts that we all hate and we'd all been enduring for the last last few years. The inaugural champions of this new belt with a new fresh lineage were Heath Slater and Rhino, the former of which earned a SmackDown contract by winning the tournament. These belts would be won by main roster ready American Alpha, by the burgeoning Wyatt family. They would be the centerpiece of an incredible rivalry as well between the New Day and the Usos in 2017. Meanwhile, the first SmackDown Tag Team titles were loving life with their foster parents on Raw. The returning Hardy Boys grabbed them at WrestleMania 33 in an impromptu ladder match. We had Sheamus and Cesaro revolutionizing Monday Night Tag scraps when they became good enemies but better friends. And we even saw a record broken for youngest champion ever when Braun Strowman won the belts with a 10-year-old boy named Nicholas at WrestleMania 34. This hot new team barely got the motor running as Nicholas wanted to focus on his fourth grade schedule rather than defend the championships. I believe Triple H refers to this as being afraid of the grind. Once again, a WWE draft would mess with our already fractured timeline when both sets of Raw and SmackDown Tag Team champions were drafted to opposing brands. How would WWE Creative deal with this double division exodus? Would both belts be vacated? Would the titles be dropped to respective brand reps on the way out? Neither of these happened. We just had a segment where Raw champions The New Day and SmackDown champions The Street Profits just swap belts. This is a creatively bankrupt decision, but at least it keeps some semblance of order and saves having to repaint two sets of titles, I guess. It'll be 2 whole years later, on SmackDown in May of 2022, where we get another disturbance in the force as the Usos, then SmackDown Tag Champs, would defeat Matt Riddle and Randy Orton, then Raw Tag Champs, to once more unify the twin pennies of WWE. Randy Orton requiring surgery expedited this title change somewhat, but it was delaying the inevitable. Once again, WWE found themselves at a loss with what to do with 2 tag team divisions. So all the gold was exported to the Bloodline saga, making for less tag team creative required and more shots of the OG and Bloodline that just go hard. Whoa, look at all those belts they have. It also meant that the OG 02 SmackDown titles got visitation rights for Friday nights, the place where they were born and bred. Both belts would stay together for a good long while from here. We have Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens taking them from the Usos, which would mark the first time in history that any kind of WWE Tag Team title match had been main eventing the showcase of the Immortals. They would later be scooped up by the Judgment Day, who would be the conduit to their ripping apart once more, as both sets were lost respectively to A-Town Down Under for SmackDown and Awesome Truth for Raw in a 6-pack ladder match at WrestleMania 40. So now, the new equilibrium sees the original SmackDown Tag Team titles, the ones that date back to 2002, the ones that were rebranded for the red brand, living their best life exclusively on Raw. Meanwhile, the current SmackDown Tag Team titles, the ones established in 2016, firmly set on SmackDown, with teams like DIY and the Motor City Machine Guns vying for them. They're back to being the workhorse tag belts that their ancestors were, an homage to the SmackDown 6 of decades before. Their latest redesign even reflects that, as they resemble the championships that their predecessors started their life as, which in turn was a tribute to the ones that came before, the ones that were banished to the history books. For now, at least, this concludes our untangling of the taglines, leaving us with some neatly labelled strands that clearly show 2 sets of tag team gold, both that have gone through numerous redesigns and reclamations, both that have the distinction of being born on SmackDown, but neither of which are the real WWF World Tag Team titles. Expect WWE to attempt to tell you otherwise, and don't be surprised if we have to untangle this mess all over again in 5 years and 6 unifications time, honestly. Stay safe. Love you, bye.